Choosing a college major. Wow, that is a huge decision. And if you're totally fascinated by why people do the things they do, you've probably ended up staring at these two words: sociology and psychology. I get it, they seem kind of similar, but they are the start of two very, very different journeys. So today, we're going to break it all down and give you the map to figure out which path is right for you.
So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Psychology or sociology? Are you someone who's drawn to the deep mysteries of the individual mind? Or are you more curious about those, invisible forces that shape our entire society? By the end of this, I promise you'll have a way clearer idea of which set of questions really gets you excited. Let's dive in. Okay, here's our game plan. We'll start with the main difference between the two. Then we'll get into the specific skills you're going to build. After that, we'll look at actual, real-world jobs for each major. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a little guide to help you make that big choice. Nice and simple.
All right, let's get right to the heart of it. The biggest, most fundamental difference between psychology and sociology isn't just what they study, it's the lens they use to look at the world. It really all boils down to the scale of their focus.
So check this out. Psychology zooms way, way in, right on the individual. It asks, why does this one person think and feel and act the way they do? Sociology, it zooms way out. It asks what larger social patterns and cultural forces are making groups of people behave in certain ways. So one looks at the single tree and the other looks at the entire forest.
So if you decide to major in psychology, you're basically becoming a detective of the human mind. You're going to dive deep into questions like, how do we make memories? What's actually driving our emotions? How does our brain literally shape who we are? This is the world of clinical psychology, where you're helping people one-on-one, and even neuropsychology, where you're uncovering the very secrets of the brain. Sociology, on the other hand, it's kind of like putting on a new pair of glasses that lets you see all the hidden rules and patterns of society. You get to investigate these huge questions. Why do some groups seem to have all the opportunities? How do our institutions, like our schools or our justice system, really work? You learn to see how the world we're all born into has this profound effect on the people we become.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what are you actually going to learn? What practical skills are you going to walk away with? Because let's be real, a major is more than just a subject. It's your training ground. So let's open up the professional toolkit you'll build in each of these fields.
With a psychology degree, you are building an amazing toolkit for understanding people on a really scientific level. You'll get hands-on with experimental design, you'll master statistical analysis, and you'll really sharpen the art of clinical observation. This means you're not just guessing what motivates somebody. You'll have the actual tools to measure and understand it. Now let's look at the sociology toolkit. With this one, you're developing the skills to think critically about society's biggest, toughest challenges. You'll learn how to pick apart these super complex problems, like poverty or social change, and you'll master research methods, like large-scale surveys and in-depth interviews, to understand how entire communities tick. All right, theory's done. Skills are in the toolkit. Now for the really big question. How does this turn into a paycheck? What does a future with a psychology degree actually look like? Well, there are some pretty clear and really impactful paths you can take. Okay, first up, the one everybody thinks of when they hear psychology, right? The clinical psychologist. This is a profession that's all about directly helping people navigate life's biggest challenges and ultimately improve their mental well-being. As a clinical psychologist, you're on the front lines, providing therapy and counseling. It is incredibly rewarding work. But, and this is a big but, it's really important to know that this is a path that requires a lot of school. As you can see, you're going to need a doctoral degree and a state license to actually practice professionally. But hold on, psychology is so much more than just clinical work. What if you could take all those same principles about human behavior and use them to make workplaces better? Well, that is the fascinating and fast-growing field of industrial organizational psychology, or IO psychology for short. So IO psychologists, basically, they take everything we know about human behavior and apply it to the world of work. They help companies hire the right people, they improve team dynamics, and they help create a work environment that's more productive and, honestly, just more enjoyable. It's a perfect example of how valuable psychology skills are in the business world. Okay, let's switch gears. What if you graduate with that sociology degree? Where does that lead? Well, the career paths here are incredibly diverse, and they're often focused on creating change on a much bigger, community-wide scale. Now, here's a career that might actually surprise you: the market research analyst.
It turns out that unique abilities sociologists have to see the bigger picture, it's incredibly valuable in the world of business. Market researchers are basically the storytellers of the business world. They dig into all this consumer data and social trends to figure out what people want and, more importantly, why they want it. That training in spotting large-scale patterns and using things like surveys, it makes a sociologist a perfect fit for this kind of work. Now, if you're the kind of person who sees a problem in the world and your brain immediately starts trying to figure out how to fix it, then a career as a policy analyst might be your calling. Think of these folks as the architects of social change. Seriously, they're the ones who dive deep into the data to see if a new government program is actually working. They're the ones who recommend new laws to improve things like healthcare or education. They use that sociological lens to find practical, real-world ways to build a better, more fair society. Okay, we've laid out the two different ways of seeing the world, we've looked at the skills, we've talked about the jobs. Now it's time for the final piece of the puzzle, bringing it all together so you can find the right fit for you. Ultimately, this whole thing comes down to what kinds of questions truly, deeply fascinate you. What problems do you want to spend your time trying to solve? Are you pulled toward the inner world of one person, or are you more captivated by the complex web that connects us all? So, how do you really choose? The Sociology Coach just breaks it down beautifully here. If you're fascinated by the inner world, things like mental health, how the brain works, what makes an individual tick, then psychology is probably your path. But if you get energized by those bigger questions about social justice, about how to actually change systems and understanding these broad patterns of inequality, then you are probably a sociologist at heart. And look, before you start stressing out about this, I want to leave you with this really important and honestly reassuring thought from the Sociology Coach. This choice feels huge right now, I know, but it is just a starting point. It's not your final destination. The critical thinking, the research skills, the analytical abilities you gain in either of these fields, they are so valuable and they will serve you well in almost any career you can imagine. So, what do you think? Which path is speaking to you? What questions do you still have about majoring in sociology or psychology? Drop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you and keep this conversation going. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today.